Hello and welcome back to another episode of Review to Review, the show where we go back and watch movies to see if we still like them. As always, my name's Adam.
And I'm Josh.
And this week we're going back to review the 2005 movie Batman Begins.
And as always, if you're new to the show, here's one massive spoiler warning for everything that happens in the movie.
Since Batman's inception in the early 1930s, there's been an ongoing struggle to bring the Batman to the big screen. It definitely seems like for every good Batman movie, there's at least 3 bad ones.
Which honestly I think is an issue that plagues the superhero genre as a whole.
Yeah, unless you're Marvel where you're just shooting 8 for 10 most of the time.
Thor, Dark World.
So when this movie came out, the Tim Burton movies and the Joel Schumacher movies were really the only things to go off of.
I'm Batman.
So when Christopher Nolan came on to Batman Begins, not only as a writer but as the director, what is it that he decided to do differently? Well, he did what is probably one of the coolest ideas in my opinion. He decided to go and completely deconstruct the character of Batman.
So the plot of Batman Begins starts with your introduction of the character of Bruce Wayne as he's a child, the reason that he has his fear of bats, and his progression into the adult that he becomes later on.
And it's actually really cool to see how they address this fear. If the movie has one overall underlying concept, it's this idea of fear, of how fear can control you, keep you from living your life, and the things you have to do in order to overcome it. And of course, you can't go 20 minutes to a Batman movie without killing his parents.
As a result, Bruce is quite obviously distraught from the situation. He thinks it's his fault, and this leads him spiraling into a depressive outbreak in adulthood, which brings us very smoothly into the concept of the League of Shadows and Ra's al Ghul. Bruce is picked up by Ra's al Ghul in order to train him to become a member of the League of Shadows and quite possibly lead them.
Can we just take a second to appreciate that this movie establishes once and for all that Batman is a ninja? If it was ever doubted before, it's gone. Like, no, Batman is clearly a ninja and it can't be taken away now.
Which, side note, we weren't talking about the animated stuff, but I still need to see that feudal Japan Batman movie.
Batman Ninja.
Yeah.
It's actually pretty good. It's actually pretty good. And I did want to go ahead and take a quick moment to mention Ken Watanabe, especially considering we just did Detective Pikachu a few weeks ago, and I didn't mention him at all. But yeah, it's great to see that a fantastic Japanese actor is getting a chance to shine in an American movie, and oh, they killed him again.
Which, on that note, can I say one of my favorite scenes in the movie actually comes from that training arc? Which is specifically when they're all lined up in a row, and he gets his cut, and he decides to blend in, and it's like, oh, you should conceal yourself better. It's like, I did, bitch.
Because I'm Batman! But once Bruce realizes that he doesn't agree with the League, he breaks away from them and heads back to Gotham City to take the training that he's learned over the past several years to save Gotham City by beating up the mentally ill.
That really is one hell of a stretch, too. It's like, well, I learned to be a ninja, let's take on an entire bloody city's worth of villains. And it's not even just villains, just criminals.
It is cool to see Batman, but when you realize what it is that inspired him, it was when he realized he couldn't stop the crime bosses, he couldn't stop the corruption that was inside the government, inside the police offices. But for him still to think that the best course of action was to go and become a ninja, and then come back and then just fight these guys, yeah, some cool shit to watch though.
And of course this all culminates into realizing that Ra's al Ghul is actually Liam Neeson, and that the League of Shadows is actually behind everything involved here.
Batman finds out that the League of Shadow intends to release a fear toxin into the air that will make everybody go insane and destroy themselves.
And for some reason this is done with a microwave gun that somehow vaporizes liquids into gases but doesn't kill people? What?
Yeah, the microwave cannon, the microwave gun, the microwave plot device, whatever it is, it's a really dumb thing. It's definitely the thing I hate the most about this movie. It's a piece of technology that can completely obliterate the water in a surrounding area. But if that's the case, how is it not destroying every human body that is in Gotham City? This thing is literally getting the pipes beneath their feet, but they're walking around just fine. So yeah, the fact that anybody is able to survive around this thing is absolute bullshit. He decides the best way to save Gotham City is to destroy this microwave thing and what's it, as well as Gotham's main source of public transportation.
Which, granted, is long decrepit since Mr. Wayne left, but
that's American public transportation in general, though. You also find out that Liam Neeson is not just a deadly assassin, he's also a dick. He burned down Bruce Wayne's house, which then guarantees that you won't see Bruce Wayne in Wayne Manor or the Batcave for the majority of the franchise.
which makes me wonder if they really just didn't want to pay the rent for the whatever manor they were using for this.
You want how much in property taxes? Burn that shit down.
So now that we got the basics covered, what did we like about the movie and what did we not like about the movie? Personally, I have to start with the fact that Batman's probably my favorite DC superhero, so my view is already going to be rose-tinted as it is. Personally, I thought that the concept as a whole of both Gotham and this Batman was well done. Gotham is a very gritty, it's a real-world location, though I would say some aspects are definitely brought out to bring a point.
Gotham City isn't just where Batman lives, but it is one of the big characters in the Batman universe as well as the DC universe as a whole. This is a living, breathing city which unfortunately thrives on crime and spits out out psychopaths on a regular basis, including Bruce Wayne.
And Nolan does a really good job at bringing this out. He shows a lot of detail. You've got the corrupt cops, you've got the street vendors, you've got the kids running around, and everything just makes this rendition of Gotham all that more believable.
I do like how Christian Bale plays Batman. A lot of people like to give him guff for the way he does his voice.
I'm Batman!
I don't really think it's bad. It kind of makes sense to me. If anything, I think it only helped the idea that you have to separate Batman from Bruce Wayne as two distinct roles.
And in Bruce Wayne's particular position, I find it necessary considering how big of a public figure he is. Unlike a role like Superman, where he's just some small-town farmer kid who ended up being, I don't know, he worked at the Daily Planet or something. What?
Yeah, man. Superman works at the Daily Planet. He's a news... You don't know any... This hurts me. Something I love seeing is actually the origin story of Batman. Even though that is a trope that people have grown tired of over the years, I really do like how they presented Batman differently than they had before. So earlier when I made that point of deconstruction, what I mean is that they took Batman and they applied all of his concepts to the real world. So for instance, giving all of his technology a grounded design, from his batarangs resembling shuriken to his Batmobile having a more tactical design as a whole.
It's a fucking tank. This concept doesn't necessarily limit itself to Batman and his technologies either. It also brings itself to Batman's allies and also his enemies. I found the transition into the Scarecrow and how the Scarecrow does what he does very well done. It touches on the drugs that he uses to cause his fear, and this also leads back to the League of Shadows as well.
Now, Jonathan Crane is actually one of my favorite Batman villains. When it comes to Batman's gallery of rogues, my favorites would have to be Mr. Freeze, Scarecrow, and of course the Joker.
Poison Ivy's hot though.
Yeah. Don't shame us for that. She was designed to be that way.
Venus flytrap you.
Huh.
I know where your mind went there.
Not only is Scarecrow obsessed with this idea in a way that clearly shows that he wants some sort of control, but it also does a really good job of reflecting Batman's mindset in a very subtle way. I've also always been kind of nerdy about the design of the Tumbler. I get that it's not a traditional Batmobile design, but I do think it looks really cool and it's a fun thing to have.
I'd say overall, another thing that I really like about Batman Begins as a whole is just the elaboration on the creation of Batman and his psyche per se. He starts off just a, your average billionaire kid, rich brat, and then grows up to be a pretty decent human, all things considered.
But now that we covered some of the things that we liked, what are some of the things that we didn't like? For me, it is the overall isolation of Batman. Just the feeling that they've made it virtually impossible for Superman, or even characters in the Batman universe like Mr. Freeze or Poison Ivy. All of those characters would have a very hard time existing in this very realistic, very grounded world that they crafted. It's cool to see that this Batman has real-world skills and uses real-world technology, but it also makes it that much harder to see him standing next to Wonder Woman or a Green Lantern.
This grounded universe doesn't really bring much opportunity for magic or meta-humans per se.
And not just this film, but the other films in the Dark Knight trilogy as well. But even here, Ra's al Ghul, who is supposed to have an eternal life thanks to the Lazarus Pit, that whole idea is completely wiped from this mythology.
Overall, as a movie, I find it hard to nitpick Batman Begins. If I was to give one particular point that I would have loved to see elaborated on more, it's I would have loved to have seen more Batman, and not just Bruce Wayne. I love that the backstory's there, but we really don't get much action as far as Batman himself goes.
And when we do get action scenes, they are incredibly blurry. Other than the sword fight at the very beginning of the movie, all the scenes are cut in a way where they're done in a shaky, jarring motion, so when it comes to the fights that you were really looking forward to seeing in the movie, you can't properly tell what's going on. And then there's of course the classic complaint of having too many villains in a movie. When you have too many characters that you have to explain, it becomes very difficult to focus on any one of them. Not only do you have to go into the backstory of how Ra's al Ghul is tied to Batman, but then you also have to explain exactly who Scarecrow is and what he's doing. And then you also have the whole subplot of the fact that Batman's actually trying to stop the mob with the Falcones.
I'm Batman.
But I would definitely say that the movie is still fun. It's just that, unfortunately, in my opinion, the first half of the movie is far more interesting than the second half.
And that brings us to our final thoughts. We think that Batman Begins is definitely worth a watch or two.
But those have been our thoughts on Batman Begins. We are far more curious about your thoughts. Go ahead and let us know in the comments down below how you felt about the movie, or how you feel about Batman in general and the fact that Superman can kill him at any instant.
To be fair, I don't think that's a fair fight.
No, it's not at all. If you agree with us, great, and if not, let's fight about it. Thanks again for coming back. We hope you enjoyed the show. If so, go ahead and like the video and give us a subscribe if you can. We'll be sure to get content out to you as soon as possible, but until then, my name's Adam.
And I'm Josh.
We'll see you guys next time. And if it doesn't work, fuck it.